Virginia puts a hard 1 hour time limit on social media for kids in that state. Will it catch on other places? Dilbert creator Scott Adams has passed away earlier this week. We'll be talking about how he was mediocre in several areas and went on to extreme wealth and success. Eric Adams started promoting and hyped a new cryptocurrency in New York City, and wow, it did not go well. It went worse than the intro I just did of that segment. The Atlantic is suing Google, saying that big tech has rigged the advertising game. The Clintons are telling Congress, no, we're not going to come testify about Epstein. And finally, are the walls caving in on Donald Trump? We'll be looking at all that and more today on Filtered.
Welcome to Filtered with TJ Walker.
Hi, and welcome. Thanks for joining me today. We'll check in on the market yesterday, as we always do. The S&P 500 closed at 6,963. That's down 0.19%. The NASDAQ Composite closed at 23,709. That's down 0.1%. Always keep in mind the long term, because frankly, it shouldn't really matter what happens yesterday or any one day, 24, 48, or week, or even month period. Over the long haul, the last 25 years, the S&P 500 is up 8.32% a year. The NASDAQ 100 is up 9.09% per year on average for the last 25 years. So please always keep in mind the long haul. Okay, let's take a look at our first story today. And this is going on in Virginia. The Virginia legislature has passed a law, and the law is now going into effect, that is banning kids from using social media for more than 1 hour per day. So this is interesting at many levels. I don't think it completely solves the problem, but it's at least a start. This begins January 1st, so just a week and a half ago. The social media platforms had to verify the age of users, and it automatically is supposed to limit, after 1 hour, anyone under 16, if they're on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, X, all of it. This isn't about parental control. This is about a mandate. This is about big government. And guess what? There is pretty strong agreement across the ideological spectrum. Now, liberals and Democrats, centrists, have been in favor of something like this for a while. But Governor Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, also favors this. He supported it because there's growing consensus in America across the ideological spectrum that there's just something nefarious going on about big tech capturing the minds of young people, turning kids into zombies. I see it myself where kids show up at the bus stop where my daughter goes. Nobody talks to each other. Everybody's all slumped down, head scrunched up, horrible posture. Nobody's talking to each other because they're staring at social media the whole time. Is this going to stop that at bus stop? I don't know, but at least it's a start. At least it's a start. Now, I should point out that NetChoice is a trade organization run by big tech. They represent Google, Meta, Snap. They say the law is unconstitutional and violates minors' First Amendment rights. We'll see about that. Look, our society has always put some restrictions based on age. You're having your right to smoke cigarettes and kill yourself abridged if you're 15 and you want to smoke cigarettes. That's not legal either. You don't have the right to drink alcohol at 16 or 15 either. So we as a society have already decided not everyone is the same. There should, in fact, be restrictions for people who are at their most vulnerable, which are the children. So I think this is a great first start. Now, before we get all excited, well, this cures the problem. No more problem with kids on social media. It's limiting it to 1 hour per platform per day. So in theory, a kid could come home from school, spend an hour on TikTok, an hour on Snapchat, an hour on, and on until midnight. But in theory, if they are addicted to just one platform, let's say TikTok, the hour runs up, then maybe we increase the odds they actually talk to their brother or sister or go outside and play. Heaven forbid that happens among kids today. So I'm hoping that this is a start. But a word out to you parents there. I would urge you, highly urge you, don't rely on government or big tech to protect your kids. Big tech is about making big money. Mark Zuckerberg, the other tech titans, are not buying entire groups of islands in Hawaii because they get up first thing in the morning thinking about, how do I protect little Timmy or little Susie or little Sanjay? How do I make them mentally healthier? That's not what any of these tech titans are thinking about. They're thinking about, first and foremost, how do I enhance shareholder value? How do I grow revenue? How do I make myself richer? And whatever concern there is for protecting the mental health of your children, it's going to be way, way down at the bottom of the list. So I'm happy to see that this cross-partisan boundaries, as I mentioned, Glenn Youngkin, the Republican governor, many of whom thought he might be a good presidential candidate last time, he's endorsed this. According to him, he says social media is causing a mental health crisis. Now, this is a theory that really became popularized in the last few years by NYU psychologist and professor Jonathan Haidt and his book, The Anxious Generation. If you haven't read it, I would highly, highly recommend it and urge you to do so. So what this law does essentially is the responsibility to make sure children are not spending too long on social media will lie with the companies rather than with just the parents. But this is a big but. If your child is a precocious in any way, savvy in any way, tech savvy, which let's face it, a lot of kids, how hard is it going to be for them to create another account and start that with a fresh hour? So they go to hour 2 with TikTok, or grab a parent's phone or an older brother's or older sister's phone, or maybe there's a tablet sitting around the house. So I think it's going to take a lot more diligence than just one law saying, well, the social media companies are supposed to verify it. I have not yet seen how they're verifying this. I mean, there's all sorts of different types of verification. Now, when I'm asked to verify my age, I upload my passport or my driver's license. Well, a 14-year-old doesn't have that. So how is this going to be done, given that 14-year-olds don't really have strong identification? Is it going to be on the honor system? Well, good luck finding a vast swath of teenagers and children in America who are going to be honorable when it comes to their word on whether they're old enough to go on social media. Because I guarantee you, every kid in America thinks they're old enough and responsible enough and mature enough to go on social media if they want it. I understand there are a few who say, I don't want this stuff. I want to be a kid. Unfortunately, that is increasingly a minority viewpoint among kids. What do you think? Post your comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Is this big government overreach? Or is it about time that we start putting some restrictions on what big tech companies are doing to harvest our eyeballs, our brains, our attention, some would argue our souls, in an attempt to make more and more money? More to come.
Filtered is brought to you by the following.
Get the deeper takes I don't post anywhere else. Subscribe now at substack.com/@TJWalkerSuccess and stay in the loop. For years, people have asked how they could get one-on-one coaching from me inexpensively. Well, now you can, anytime, anywhere with the TJ Walker AI clone. It's like having me in your pocket, ready to help you prep for a speech, polish a pitch, or calm your nerves before a big meeting.
You talk to it. It responds like I would, based on my real-world coaching of thousands of leaders and communicators. Check it out at tjwalker.ai. It's not just smart, it's personal. Want to support the show? Skip the ads and buy me a coffee. That's buymeacoffee.com/tjwalker.
Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, has passed away at age 68. He passed away earlier this week. He had a long battle with metastatic prostate cancer, according to the Associated Press. Now, Dilbert is an extraordinarily beloved, or at least was beloved, cartoon character. At its peak, it was seen in about 2,000 newspapers in 70 countries around the world. It's translated into 25 nations or 25 languages. In 1997, Adams won the Reuben Award, the cartoonist's highest honor. And the same year, Dilbert became the first fictional character to make Time magazine's list of the most influential Americans. So he was kind of a big deal. And frankly, he was funny. Back when I read the funny papers, he is someone I read every single day. That's been a while. But it was a huge, huge success. Why am I talking about him? Now, later, in the last few years in his life, he kind of tarnished his reputation. He said some things that arguably were wildly racist. Okay, that's not the point of why I want to talk about him today, and I don't mean to sugarcoat it or discount that. Why I'm interested in talking about Scott Adams is I think he's a fantastic role model for living the creative life in many, many regards. He was a mid-level manager at a company, frustrated, started drawing. Now, he'd wanted to be a cartoonist as a small child, but never really pursued it. By his own admission, he's not the funniest guy in the world, not good enough to be a professional stand-up comedian. He's not the best artist in the world. His art wouldn't really make him a living if he were just a full-time professional fine artist. And he's not the biggest business genius. He's not a Steve Jobs or whatever. But what he did is he combined them. And he's been very honest and forthright about that in admitting. He said, I'm not really a great artist. I'm not the funniest guy, but I'm pretty good at this. I'm pretty good at this. I'm pretty good at this. And I blended them together. And he turned it into a wildly successful creative career. He didn't have to work at the big corporation any longer. He didn't have to sit in endless meetings and suffer the things that the Dilbert character had to suffer, because he saw his opportunity and he combined his strengths in a unique way. That's something I think most people don't do enough, or they don't think to do it again. So often there's the sense of, well, if I had LeBron James' talent, if I were 6'8" and could jump 5 feet in the air, well, of course I could be exceptional in the world, but I don't have any one unique talent that is so astronomically off the charts, 0.0001%, the way LeBron James does or Tiger Woods. Therefore, I have to be content with a boring job and a boring career and a boring life. Scott Dilbert showed there is, in fact, another way. And for that, I congratulate. And by the way, he made, I don't have a total dollar value on it, but tens and tens of millions of dollars. I mean, he made big coin with his art. You know, when you're syndicated in 2,000 papers and all the book deals he got and speaking gigs and other things, he made a very, very nice living. He became wealthy. Let's not kid ourselves. Let's not sugarcoat. It's not a nice living. He became wealthy as a creator. Now, we live in a world now where everyone wants to be a TikTok star or a TikTok or YouTube star. Okay, but this guy was doing it in the 1980s. He did it without social media. So that deserves a special commendation, I think. Again, I don't mean to sugarcoat some of the racist, inflammatory, sexist things he said. He is an interesting case because he identified 4 or 5 years ago as a big liberal, but he really went out of his way to praise President Trump as a communicator, which I have done that as well. praised certain aspects of Trump's communication. That's not unusual. But then he started saying things that just struck a lot of people as bizarrely racist. And I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially, white people shouldn't associate with black people because black people are racist. Things that made people think, this guy's gone off the deep end. Again, not the real lesson I want you to take away from here. The whole point of Filtered with TJ Walker is we look at top news stories, filter them through the lens of communication skills and personal development skills to figure out how you can be more successful. And the other thing that fascinates me about him is he kept his job for a number of years, even after he started doing a daily cartoon and got picked up by syndication. He didn't just say, well, I'm doing this all or nothing and jump off a cliff. No. He was willing to work hard enough to keep the day job in the boring corporate world where he got a lot of material for his cartoons. And then he waited till he had some level of prosperity and financial cushion before he said, all right, I'm doing this full time. Gary Vaynerchuk, the social media guru, talks about that a lot. But still, we live in a culture where it's all about you got to be 18, you got to work 20 hours a day and eat ramen noodles to follow your dream. Otherwise, you have to be a boring stooge working full time in a boring job, and you have to be one or the other. No, you don't. You can pursue your dream right now. In many ways, he reminds me of someone like Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart, by her own admission, is not the world's best chef. She's not the world's best decorator. She's not the world's best gardener. She's not the world's best looking person. But you look at her skills in all of those areas. She combined them together to create something unique. She did become arguably the best in the world at creating a lifestyle that people want, a lifestyle that people aspire to. So she really did become world-class at creating the aspirational lifestyle. Someone beautiful, great cook, great home, great decoration, great garden, having it all. That's what I think many people need to think more about, which is not what's the one thing I'm best at, but what are the areas where I'm very good, not world-class, very good, and can I combine maybe two of those, maybe three of those? I hope I don't seem too immodest, but I think that's essentially what I've done. I'm not the world's best public speaker. I'm not the world's best media news anchor, but I do have 12 million student enrollments for my public speaking courses, my online public speaking courses, media training courses, and personal development courses, because I am a good speaker, I'm a good trainer, and I'm good at starting things earlier and suffering pain and no income for years and years and years. Put those three things together, that's what's made me successful. Because I started my first online training course in 1998, lost money for 15 years. Took a long time, but when it paid off, it paid off very nicely. So that's what I want you to think about. What is it that you're good at in a couple of areas? And then how can you blend it together in something new? When Scott Adams started this, there was Garfield the cat, but there wasn't really any cartoon that was animal-based but really looked at The Office. Now, we think of a really popular show like The Office and think of it, that was on a long time ago. Well, Scott Adams was on creating a long time before The Office was around. So finding humor in The Office became his unique way of blending his talents together. And I want to commend him for that. So let's look at some more things he said. As I mentioned, he said himself, I'm not the best at drawing, I'm not the best at humor, but the combination worked. His editor at United Media, the syndicate, said, I looked first for humor and only secondarily for art. So he wasn't picked for this syndicated column because it was the best drawn art, because it was funny. And again, this was before blogging. I mean, he started in the 1980s, so he really was a true survivor, and he has passed away. So we don't have to, if it wasn't your best friend and you weren't in favor of his later racist sentiments, I'm not asking you to mourn the loss, but I am asking you to learn from it. I think we can all learn from someone like this who not a LeBron James 0.0001% talent, but someone who had a couple of skills, blended them together, and made a great career out of it.
Imagine having a communication coach who never sleeps. Meet your new secret weapon, the TJ Walker AI clone. Go to tjwalker.ai and start getting custom coaching 24/7. No scheduling, no hourly fees. I've trained presidents, prime ministers, and Fortune 500 CEOs. But the same exact communication I've delivered to world leaders is now available to you online, anytime at MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. Whether you're speaking on camera, pitching a client, or handling a crisis, you need these tools. These aren't fluffy motivational videos. They're practical, battle-tested techniques to help you speak clearly, competently, and persuasively. Go to MediaTrainingWorldwide.com and take your communication to the next level.
We are back. Thanks so much for joining me. Eric Adams, the former mayor of New York City, in hot water already. He's launched a new cryptocurrency called NYC Token, saying it would help raise money to fight anti-Semitism and anti-Americanism. There were big billboards in Times Square. He says, this thing's going to take off like crazy. He was saying this in a hype video, and it did take off for a few minutes. It soared to a capitalization of $600 million, but then, poof, it collapsed. Roughly $2.5 million was withdrawn from accounts tied to the launch without notice. About $1 million remains unaccounted for. Now, most crypto analysts flag this as a real red flag. This is danger. This is showing all the signs of a classic rug pull. That's a classic crypto scheme where insiders hype a coin, get it up, and then cash out. The whole thing collapses, and the vast, vast majority of people lose their money. Sometimes all their money, sometimes some of the money, but they lose money. Now, Adams doesn't seem to want to talk about it. He's all of a sudden a little bit hard to get a hold of. So Eric Adams is someone who is seen as a little bit sleazy. Let's not kid ourselves. He was under investigation pretty much the entire time he was the mayor of New York City. He's now been replaced by Zoran Mandani as of January 1st. So Adams has no power anymore, but he still does have the power to get attention, being the former mayor of New York City. So a couple of things to realize about crypto. Anybody can launch a coin. There are no required disclosures. There's no fiduciary duty anyone owes to anything. There can be instant liquidity. You can have sort of secretive wallets, and there's a lot of irreversible transactions. So it's not that crypto necessarily attracts accidentally con artists. It's that it's basically made for con artists. If you're a con artist, a con man, and it's typically men, although not always, crypto is the greatest thing ever. Now, I get probably more email and nasty comments and comments in general from people who disagree with me every time I want to criticize some harebrained crypto scheme or even Bitcoin, the godfather of it all. People continually telling me how ignorant I am, how foolish I am. Let's look at some of the greatest hits of crypto. We had FTX, remember Sam Bankman-Fried? $8 to $10 billion in customer losses. Terra Luna, $60 billion in market value wiped out. OneCoin, a $4 billion global scam. BitConnect, $2.4 billion scam. Celsius Network, 4.7 billion gone. Mount Gox, 850,000 Bitcoin lost, worth between, back then, $450 million. Today, it'd be worth about 30 billion. A Turkish crypto coin known as Thodex, $2 billion. Squid Game token, $3 billion rug pull. SafeMoon, billions of dollars erased, executives charged. And don't even get me started on things like the Miami crypto coin, started by the former mayor there, Xavier Suarez, which did absolutely nothing and quickly became worthless. So I'm going to urge you, again, beg you, when someone is trying to sell you crypto of any sort, put your hand on your wallet, protect it, and then run. Run as far away from them as possible. Now, I was getting emails and texts from friends within hours of this new billboard becoming unveiled in Times Square in New York City, with Mayor Adams' shiny face promoting this, saying, hey, the links are already broken. They're already not working. The thing is already a sham. So look, folks, I get it's fun to say things like fiat currency is outdated and bad and evil, and big banks are bad and evil, and government is bad and evil. I get it. That appeals to a lot of people. But, and it is a huge but, it makes it so much easier for con men to steal your money. There's no bank to appeal to. There's no government to appeal to. There's no prosecutor to appeal to. And I do find it comical, sad, and also predictable that when all the Bitcoin bros and all the Bitcoin investors and venture capitalists had their money in Silicon Valley Bank and it went bankrupt, what did they do? They went crawling and crying to the federal government, saying, we know we attack the federal government. We say you're bad all the time, but please, please, please give us all of our money. Stick it to the taxpayers and give a bunch of money to the bank so they can give us our money. So hypocrites, yes. By the way, this story does give me an opportunity to point out an important fact about this show. As I mention frequently, typically every day, this show is about filtering the news, business news, technology news, cultural news, and yes, sometimes politics, through the lens of communication skills, personal development skills, and based on who I am, which is a sane, sensible centrist. Unfortunately, some of you have such small minds. The second you hear me criticize a politician you don't like, you automatically assume I'm just a party spokesman for another party, the party you don't like. You automatically assume I'm a political pundit in the ilk of a talking head on Fox or MSNBC. That's not the case. Now, I do often criticize, as I will do later in this show, members of political parties different from Eric Adams' political party. But I call it like I see it because I'm here not as a partisan, but as a sane, sensible centrist. Eric Adams is a Democrat. He was elected mayor of the largest city in America as a Democrat. He was a Democratic leader, a Democratic spokesperson. And here he is doing horrible things, and I'm calling him out on it. No, it doesn't mean I'm Sean Hannity. What it means is I'm giving it to you straight. So I ask you not to agree with everything I say, but I would ask you to simply agree with the premise of this show, which is I'm not here giving you some automatic knee-jerk partisan spin. I am giving you insights, truth, filtered through the lens of communication skills and personal development. The other thing, why I'm so fascinated with crypto is, to me, it speaks to a much bigger problem in our society where so many people, especially young men, have bought into this idea that they don't need to build real skills in the marketplace to get rich. I can just sit back, be a Bitcoin bro, perhaps move to Puerto Rico, buy a Ferrari, play video games all day long, but by buying various forms of crypto and finding suckers to pay more for it later, I'll get rich. And I'm telling you, it catches up with you. At some point, most, not all, most end up going broke. And then what happens? You've wasted your 20s and you've learned no skills. The only connections, the only professional associations you have are with people who are similarly involved with various games of legal and illegal con games. Doesn't leave you with much. So whether it is investing in crypto, which is really not investment, it's speculation, whether it's betting on football games, whether it's being involved with prediction markets, whether it's buying lottery tickets, my message to you is stop it. If you want long-term wealth, long-term financial stability, the surest thing is to do some hard work. I realize that's not going to make this video go viral. Do some hard work, learn a skill so that you can help people solve real problems where they value your product or your solution. Ultimately, that is far and away the more effective way of gaining wealth and financial stability. So enough with the crypto stuff already.
We'll be right back after this break.
Want more? Grab my 5-book success library for $9.95 at tjwalker.com/books. It's the fastest way to level up your communication. Imagine being the most confident person in the room, whether you're on Zoom or on stage. That's what thousands of professionals are learning to do right now through my online communication courses. At Media Training Worldwide, you can access my complete training library on demand, affordable, and actually effective. Whether you're preparing for media interviews, client presentations, or TED-style talks, I've got you covered. Check it out, MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. You'll never wing it again.
The Atlantic has sued Google and its parent company, Alphabet, alleging that Google has monopolized the digital advertising ecosystem, controlling the ad server, the exchange, and the auction itself. In a 94-page federal complaint, the Atlantic says Google forced publishers to sell ads at lower prices while extracting monopoly profits, falsely claiming its tools would help publishers earn more. Well, publishers aren't earning more. Many of them earning less than ever. Yeah, that's if they haven't gone out of business already. Internal documents allegedly describe Google's auction manipulations as inherently unfair. The lawsuit leans heavily on prior federal ruling by Judge Liani Brinkema, who found that Google's conduct was exclusionary and harmed publishers. This Freudian slip there, I say protesters. We're seeing publishers becoming protesters because they see their livelihoods melting away. This is existential for journalism, or what we think of journalism. If Google controls how ads are sold, priced, and distributed, then publishers are just tenants in someone else's building, and they are paying rent to survive. So is this really going to change? Are they going to win a lawsuit in today's current regulatory environment? I don't think so, folks. Elections have consequences. And when you saw the inauguration last year, you did not see the publisher of Atlantic Magazine or the New Yorker, or for that matter, the New York Times, sitting behind Trump. No. You saw the CEOs of Google, the CEOs of Amazon, the CEOs of Facebook, the CEOs of Tesla sitting around Donald Trump. The big tech boys are the ones who got the money. Therefore, they got the power. Therefore, they can essentially buy and sell politicians, and I would argue judges. If you don't like that, you're going to have to change your vote. You're going to have to convince some of your friends and family to do the same thing. Because even if judges ultimately rule in favor of the Atlantic, and I'm not really that optimistic about it, and I'm not a lawyer. I think it's only a matter of time until appeals, Google's going to have a lot more money for attorneys than the Atlantic. And hey, I use Google every day. I use Gmail every day. I use a million Google products a day. I also go to the Atlantic, if not every day, probably 5 days a week. I am a big fan of the Atlantic. But at some point, it's easy to imagine the president picking up the phone and just telling a judge or tweeting to a judge, hey, you better stick it to Jeffrey Goldberg, that editor of the Atlantic, because I don't like him because he made me look bad in the past. That's happened many times. So I think the Atlantic's going to have a hard time. To be fair, it's not just Google that's done this. It's Craigslist. Now, everybody loves Craigslist. It's simple, it's clean, it's Craig Newmark, the owner, has not become some horrible, obnoxious oligarch. He actually gives money to support local journalism. But what Craigslist did is it completely destroyed classified ads for newspapers. And that was the lifeblood of so many local newspapers in America that have all gone bankrupt. So classified ads not typically as big of an issue for a company like Atlantic. What's the answer? We do need some recognition that Google has a monopoly. Well, TJ, what about free enterprise systems? Shouldn't they be able to do what they want? The whole concept of free enterprise is you have to have competition. There's really very little competition for Google, arguably Facebook. But there's just not that much competition. They can charge what they want. You've got to deal with them. And what Atlantic is pointing out is it's so much harder for them to make money from advertising. They can't sell directly to advertisers nearly as easily anymore. And it is stifling. Now, the Atlantic has done a fantastic job of really being creative. They have events where they charge money and make money. They have newsletters. They have other products they put out, but most journalistic organizations can't do that. And if you say to yourself, well, is the world going to end if we don't have another Atlantic, or if the Atlantic goes away? I think the world would be a poorer place. But the bigger problem, frankly, are local newspapers, small towns, mid-sized towns, maybe your town, that simply can't survive. Because if, let's say, for example, they were making $1 million a year from ads in their newspaper, and now everything is migrated online, even if the very same local stores want to advertise with them, those stores are going through Google. And instead of making $1 million in ad revenue, maybe they're making 90,000. All of a sudden, you got to fire your staff. You've got to shut down the printing press if you have one. You've got to shut down the office. And the bigger problem, frankly, is you have to fire reporters who do the actual reporting about what the city commission's doing, the county commission and the school board, and all the people who could make decisions in the best interest of your family, your community, your kids, but could also do whatever they want to line their pockets. Without local journalism, you'll never know. So I'm rooting for the Atlantic in this case. Let me be very upfront. But I'm not optimistic that with the current political framework we have, those in power, both judges and elected officials, that Google is going to lose its monopoly on advertising.
Imagine having a communication coach who never sleeps. Meet your new secret weapon, the TJ Walker AI clone. Go to tjwalker.ai and start getting custom coaching 24/7. No scheduling, no hourly fees. I've trained presidents, prime ministers, and Fortune 500 CEOs. But the same exact communication I've delivered to world leaders is now available to you online, anytime at MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. Whether you're speaking on camera, pitching a client, or handling a crisis, you need these tools. These aren't fluffy motivational videos. They're practical, battle-tested techniques to help you speak clearly, confidently, and persuasively. Go to MediaTrainingWorldwide.com and take your communication to the next level.
The Clintons are back in the news, and they are refusing to testify in front of Congress regarding Epstein. Now, I heard this, and my immediate reaction is, uh-oh, maybe they have something to hide. What's going on here? Because certainly there's been a lot of news coverage about Bill Clinton's association with Epstein over the years, and Epstein allegedly went to the White House 17 times when President Clinton was in power. Is he hiding something? So my gut reaction always is to look at the story, regardless of party. Someone who's a pure Democratic hack, for example, would say, oh, something possibly negative about Clinton. I'm not even going to read the story. Not even going to look at it. That's not my perspective. I'm here as a sane, sensible centrist. So I want to play it to you straight. So I decided to look into this and do a little more research. Here's what I found. So again, the facts are that Bill and Hillary have been ordered to testify, to give live testimony before the House Oversight Committee in its Epstein inquiry. The chairman is Republican James Comer, and he's threatening them with contempt of Congress charges. The way that works is he would then send it to the Department of Justice, and then they could, in theory, put the Clintons in prison for a year. Doesn't happen very often, but that's at least the potential. Now, here's what the Clintons are saying. And there's some nuance here. There's some complexity. So if you're one of these people who just says, okay, anything with the Clintons, I don't even need to hear anymore. Guilty. You don't need to watch any more of this. If you're someone with an open mind saying, what's really going on here, then please bear with me. Now, the Clintons argue that the subpoenas are legally invalid because they lack legislative purpose and are designed to publicly humiliate and potentially entrap them. Again, you could say, if you don't know much about this, you could say, well, just say the truth and no one can entrap you and no one can embarrass you. Only you can embarrass yourself. That's kind of the knee-jerk reaction, but listen in. There is more here. They've already provided sworn written statements to a gazillion questions about this, and they've already notified Congress they will answer more questions. They would like to do it in writing. So in fact, they are not hiding anything. They're asking for the same accommodation that Congressman Comer granted to other witnesses. Their claim, and I have to say it has a lot of credibility, is Comer wants Clinton to help Trump. Comer's going out of his way to say, I don't want to see anything related to Donald Trump. Never mind this fact that Trump and Epstein are everywhere, that they seem locked at the hip like that they were best friends. I don't want to see any of that. I only want to somehow investigate and make Democrats look bad. And again, to be fair, Epstein had a lot of associations with Democrats. Yes, he did know Bill Clinton. And yes, he had very high-level associations with Alan Dershowitz, who certainly back then was seen as a leading Democratic spokesperson and attorney, not to mention Lawrence Summers, the former president of Harvard University, who was really caught in kind of a slimy way, not an illegal way, but a slimy way, asking for bro dating advice from Jeffrey Epstein long after it was obvious to the whole world that he was a guilty sex felon. Okay, so back to the Clintons. As far as anyone knows, as far as evidence, the last interaction Bill Clinton ever had with Jeffrey Epstein was in the early 2000s. So he broke off long time ago, more than 20 years ago. There's really no evidence that there was any connection after about 2003, 2004. There's never been any criminal accusations. Now, it is true, Donald Trump has publicly said numerous times that Clinton went to Epstein Island. Only problem is, not true, zero evidence. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to the Clintons. Listen to Donald Trump's own chief of staff, Susie Wiles, who says, Trump keeps saying this. It's not true. There's no evidence Clinton ever went to Epstein Island. So here's what's really going on. And I didn't understand this initially. So the reason really high-profile figures like to do this testimony through a written process is it's very easy for a member of Congress playing for all the cameras to put some document in front of you. It could be made up. And then ask you in front of all the cameras, what is this? How do you respond to this? And it's very easy for there to be sound bites of saying, well, I don't know. I don't remember. Or, this looks bad, but I don't. There's all sorts of ways you can easily make a fool out of anybody. It could happen to you. It could happen to me. If someone decides in advance they want to interrogate you live in front of Congress with cameras on. Now, I'm not suggesting people should never be asked to do that. I think it's good when all the tech leaders or all the tobacco leaders are occasionally asked to testify in front of Congress. But what's going on here is different. This is a clear-cut example of a Republican member of Congress doing the bidding of President Trump, trying to take the heat off of Trump. Because if there are some tenuous connections between Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein, there's 10,000 more connections of very, very strong interlocking nature between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. And Representative James Comer, the Republican in charge of this investigation in Congress, doesn't seem to have any interest in it whatsoever. It's only Democrats he's interested in investigating. So Clintons have lawyered up, as they should, and they are making the case that all the other people who have had similar contact with Epstein, i.e. really none in the last 20 years, have been allowed to give their testimony through sworn written testimony. All they're asking for is exactly the same opportunity, the same level of respect. Of course, if you're a member of Congress in the Republican Party, nothing's going to get you a primary campaign faster or a well-funded opponent or a nasty tweet than showing respect to a Clinton.
Want a shortcut to powerful communication skills? Download the TJ Walker Success Library, 5 of my best-selling books for only $9.95. Go to tjwalker.com/books. Instant access, big impact. I've had entire YouTube channels wiped out overnight, so if you enjoy this show, don't lose track of me. The safest way is my newsletter, substack.com/@TJWalkerSuccess. Sign up for free and you'll get exclusive commentary, live session alerts, and first access to new tools. Again, that's substack.com. Just search for TJ Walker or go to substack.com/@TJWalkerSuccess. Your direct line to everything I do. Are the walls caving in around Donald Trump right now? There are a lot of changes in the political dynamic going on in Washington right now. Let's dissect some of these. First of all, Joe Rogan. Now, Joe Rogan was someone who endorsed Donald Trump in the 2024 election. Now, here's what he has to say about the ICE tactics going on in Minneapolis. He says, are we really going to be the Gestapo? Where's your papers? Is that what we've come to? So in the same way that Lyndon Johnson lost Walter Cronkite, for those of you old enough to remember that, when Cronkite essentially turned against the Vietnam War, we have sort of the modern day Cronkite, arguably, Joe Rogan, turning against this war against American citizens and non-citizens and migrants in our country, where Rogan is now comparing ICE and Trump's initiatives to the Gestapo from a certain German regime back in the 1930s. So you can always complain about, well, some,
AOC said this, or Bernie Sanders, someone on the far left, some radical lunatic. Nobody thinks of Joe Rogan as a radical left-wing lunatic. People either consider him a centrist or a center-right political figure who did, in fact, endorse Donald Trump. Now he's saying the United States has essentially become a Gestapo, or what ICE is doing is like the Gestapo. Now, there's more and more civil unrest in America regarding the fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Good. Her name, buttons celebrating her life are showing up in places like the Golden Globe Awards. It's becoming a part of our culture now, and more people are scrutinizing, saying, why do we have ICE officials shooting Americans? Again, to remind you, Renee Nicole Good, an American citizen, not that it should matter, white, woman, mother, again, not that it should matter, but it does to a lot of people, a Christian, shot in the face 3 times. And again, Joe Rogan says it's very ugly to watch a U.S. citizen shot in the face. Now, this is not the first American to be shot and killed by ICE in the last year. It's happened in other times, and about 8 have, in fact, been shot. Here's what Minnesota State Representative Michael Howard said. It feels like our community is under siege by our own federal government. Now, there have been a lot of dystopian movies in the past about what happens when, outsiders come and take over America, the takeover America. And it's typically in the fantasy dystopia by liberal Hollywood. It's typically some far left extremists that have taken over. Certainly in the minds of conservatives, that's it. But that's not what's happening here. It's happening by people who claim they believe in law and order, limited government, protecting citizens. And yet we see American citizens shot in the face by our own government. So yes, it seems like things are under siege. So again, in normal times, what does a politician do who's in charge? What does a president do? Someone has been shot, killed. A lot of people look at footage and come to different conclusions. In normal times, you say there will be an investigation. We want to be fair and impartial here. That's not what this administration did. They instantly vilified and attacked this Christian woman, this U.S. citizen, automatically denounced her as essentially a part of the lunatic left or a victim of left-wing radical extremist brainwashing is essentially what J.D. Vance said. And they said not only was the ICE official who shot and killed her 3 times, shot her 3 times, not only does he not deserve extra scrutiny or investigation, but he should be praised. He essentially should be seen as a hero. That has been the message from our federal government. And it strikes a lot of people as bizarre, as completely atypical of how anything like this has ever been handled, and as a cover-up. Why not investigate when tens of millions, perhaps as many as 100 million Americans who've seen the footage of this woman being shot in the face and have concluded that she was murdered? Why aren't you respecting them enough to say, let's at least investigate? But that's not what's happened. Oh, but there is going to be an investigation. It turns out that the Justice Department has ordered an investigation to look at the background of this woman. Let's see if we can somehow find out if she didn't pay a parking ticket in 1985 to make her look bad. Let's see if she once stumbled into a meeting somewhere where someone said something politically provocative, so we can make the case that she was radicalized. Although driving with your spouse to pick up a 6-year-old child from school doesn't sound like radical behavior, but that's what is happening. So meanwhile, a number of federal prosecutors were asked to investigate this woman. One of them resigned, and then another, and then another, and then another. 6 different federal prosecutors resigned because they've had enough. They know a sham kangaroo court. They know what dictatorships do, and they know what democracy does. In dictatorships, someone says, oh, this person is against us. Let's just find something to say they're guilty so we can throw them in prison or do worse and get rid of them. Just make up something. We don't care. We want to get rid of that person. That's how dictatorships, that's how authoritarian regimes work. That is how fascist regimes work. And a number of career prosecutors said, nope, not going to be a part of that. So they are resigning one after another. They are refusing to investigate what's happening. They're not going to investigate this woman and drag her through the mud when the government is preventing them from investigating the shooter and what actually happened that day. The prosecutors are saying this is undermining the rule of law, and they are absolutely correct. So a lot of pieces coming here. There's one more interesting piece that has dropped in the last 24 hours. New grand secret jury transcripts have been released from Georgia regarding election interference investigation. Under oath, here's what a number of Republicans said. Senator Lindsey Graham said basically, Donald Trump would believe Martians stole his votes if you told him that. Governor Brian Kemp called Trump's pressure a fruitless exercise. All of them are on record basically saying they understand the election was not stolen in Georgia. They know that Trump lost. They told him again and again and again. And he refused to listen to facts. David Ralston, the former Georgia House Speaker, said the fake elector plan was the craziest thing I've ever heard. Again, going back to 2020, Donald Trump said, okay, if I lost the election, I'm not saying I did, if I lost the election and the state wants to send these electors to vote in the Electoral College, let's just come up with a whole different group of electors to say I won, and we'll send them and count their votes. This was the brilliant idea that Donald Trump came up with to steal the election in 2020. And David Ralston, a supporter of Trump, a former Georgia House Speaker, a Republican, said it was the craziest thing he'd ever heard. So we're hearing again and again and again from members of Trump's own party that they tried to tell him he lost the election. His brain is absolutely impervious to any fact that doesn't say he won everything, that he's the biggest, the smartest, the handsomest, the wealthiest, the richest, the greatest guy ever. If you tell him anything that counters that theme, it doesn't compute. It goes in one ear and out the other. Again, don't take my word for it. Don't take the word of Democrats or AOC or Bernie Sanders. Take the word of all the Republicans in Georgia, as well as Lindsey Graham, who is one of the staunchest supporters. But there he is on record is saying Trump won't believe anything truthful if it makes him come to the conclusion he lost the election. He'll believe absolutely anything, again, quoting Lindsey Graham, even if you told him Martians stole your votes. He would believe that. Okay, let's switch to one other item dropping that I do think is significant. Senator Alyssa Slotkin. Now, she is a Democrat, so it's certainly not unusual or wouldn't be unexpected to see her criticizing Trump. But this issue is a little different. Slotkin is a former CIA officer, Iraq War veteran, and she was one of these senators in a video simply stating facts that soldiers have the right and obligation not to follow illegal orders. If your sergeant comes to you and says, shoot the next short, red-haired person who walks around the corner, and there's no justification for it, you could say, well, that would clearly be illegal. I'm not going to follow that order, and you would be in the right. It's something every military person, enlisted or officer, is told in basic training. It's really not much controversy about it, but Trump and his regime says anything that seems like it's criticizing us is sedition. So now there's an investigation. Federal prosecutors are now investigating Alyssa Slotkin allegedly for sedition. Meanwhile, we have a traitor in the White House who was guilty of sedition on January 6th, 2021. That's okay, apparently. It's okay to attack America, end up with people dead, urging people to fight like hell, which is what Trump did. But someone reminding soldiers to follow the law, that now seems as sedition. Here's what Slotkin said. I've studied this kind of political authoritarianism in other countries my entire professional life. I just can't believe I'm talking about it in my own country. So yet another one, and she's seen as a very centrist Democrat. This is not Bernie Sanders here. She's not Elizabeth Warren. She's seen as a very centrist Democrat with a strong law and order, military, CIA background. And she is now saying what this administration is doing is acting like authoritarian thugs. So yeah, folks, it is time to get a little scared. Things are getting real here. And you can say, well, what do I care about Slotkin? She's a Democrat. I don't like Democrats. Who cares? And you can say, well, what do I care about Mark Kelly? Yeah, he may be court-martialed, loses retirement for simply stating facts on the same issue. I don't care about him. I'm not a centrist Democrat like he is. I'm a Republican. Well, it's happening to Marjorie Taylor Greene too. So it turns out it's not about party. It's not about philosophy anymore. We are devolving into a society where all power flows from the answer to one question. Do you give 100% unquestioning agreement and faith in the dear leader in the White House, or do you still want the right to think for yourself? Do you want the right to have your own responsibilities, to question things? If so, you could end up being investigated, imprisoned, or worse. Just ask Virginia Good. Want to communicate like a pro? Go to MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. Millions have already transformed their speaking skills. Why not you? This show doesn't run on a lot of corporate sponsorships or big media backing. It runs on caffeine and your support. If you like what you're hearing and want to say thanks, you can buy me a coffee. Really. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/TJ Walker. It's quick, it's easy, and yes, it helps cover editing, hosting, and staying relatively ad-free for as long as possible. Buymeacoffee.com/TJ Walker. Your $3.95 makes a real difference. It's time for question of the day. This one comes from Kimberly. She's a student in my workplace communication course about how to speak up in meetings. She writes, what's the best way to apply what was learned in this course to real everyday situations? Here's my number one tip, Kimberly. The next meeting you're in, ask one question. That's a form of public speaking, and believe it or not, it's something most people are afraid to do. Now, you may be perfectly fine asking a question if you're meeting with one or two or three colleagues, but for most people, there's a certain number of people in the room, or perhaps on Zoom or online, where you feel like, oh, this is a big crowd. I don't want to raise my hand or say anything. Let me wait till later. Let me stay in the background. Don't do it. If you want to be seen as a thoughtful person, as a leader, as someone articulate, as someone who's potentially ready for the next promotion, your colleagues, your people you report to, people who report to you, they need to see you confidently speaking. And I don't mean you have to grandstand and give some big long-winded 10-minute presentation in the middle of every meeting and have people think, oh no, this guy's going to go on again and he won't shut up. No. But you do need to practice more speaking in front of people. The easiest way to do it is to ask one question. Don't be afraid of looking stupid. If you're in a meeting and you're confused about something, then maybe other people are too. Ask the question. And if nothing else, you're letting the person speaking realize, okay, this person's paying attention. They're trying to learn. They're following what I'm saying. They're not just staring at their cell phone, ignoring me. So it's often seen as a sign of respect. And all it is asking a question. The larger the audience, the more people attending the meeting, the fewer people want to ask questions because most people are scared of public speaking. And if there's more than a handful of people, it's going to feel like public speaking. People are going to feel like, oh, all these people are there. Well, the boss is there. I don't want to look stupid. Okay. Is it possible, 1 out of 500 times you ask a question, someone could think you look stupid? It's possible. Once famously at an all-hands meeting at Apple, some relatively, low-level engineer stood up and said, how come I didn't get a bigger raise? And Steve Jobs is in front of thousands of people. And he said something to the effect of, that's such a stupid question, you're fired. Please escort him out of here. So I'm not saying it's impossible to embarrass yourself asking a question, but use your judgment. Obviously, if you're in front of thousands of people, asking a CEO who probably doesn't even know you why you didn't personally get a raise, obviously that's kind of a stupid question. Use your judgment, really listen in the meeting, think, and ask a question that you want to know the answer to, and presumably other people might find it valuable as well. Every time you do that, it makes it easier to speak, present in meetings, to ask more questions, and to be seen as a thoughtful leader. Because the biggest difference quite often between people who end up being senior managers, senior vice presidents, presidents, or even CEOs, and people who get stuck at mid-level management is the ability to communicate and to communicate in meetings. So you can work on it every single day in every meeting you have. Hey, I'm TJ Walker. I'm wishing you the best in your career. Thanks so much for being a part of mine. This is what I do now, in addition to media training and public speaking training and creating personal development courses. I'm here every day. If you got any value out of this show, please like it, subscribe to it, follow it, tell your friends about it. Thanks. See you tomorrow.